professional help on it to really put pressure on the military itself to change its ways. It was so bad back in the 2002 and 2003, 2004, that even Donald Rumsfeld created a task force on sexual assault in the military. However, even with the creation of that, they forgot to staff it and fund it and appoint anyone to it until 2007. But that task force is now going around to military bases and independently talking to men and women on the base about what's going on. The issue of sexual assault in the military is probably the most studied criminal act, not even criminal act, one of the most studied phenomena. There have probably been at least 60 studies that have gone back from the time that lots of women were coming into the military in World War II. It's been studied. I mean, this is not a recent phenomenon that women are raped, but the numbers now are coming forward to show that we should have been really concerned about this much, much longer. I gave this talk about 2 hours ago, and I mentioned in it that you never know, so many people are quiet about this, and I was in the military 29 years, and I knew that there were tragic incidents, that there were some women that had been sexually assaulted or raped. I never in my wildest dreams thought that there were any statistics like this. About 18 months ago, I was visiting a friend of mine, she and I went through basic training. I was visiting her and her husband and her family. So they were saying, oh, what have you been doing lately? Where have you been traveling? What have you been doing? And I said, well, one of the things I've been doing is a lot of research on this issue of sexual assault of women in the military and about women that end up dying and in the military. And, because of 120 women who have died in Iraq, 50 of them have died of what they call non-combat related incidents. And of those 50, at least half of them, when you read what happened to them, it's like, something's fishy there. And of those half, 11 of them have been, the military has said they committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And probably some of them did. But when you read the stories of all of them, you go, I don't think that's what happened. I think there was something else that was going on there. So anyway, I was telling these friends, both of whom had been in the military at the same time I had, and both of them completed a full military active duty career. When I finished telling them, I was working on this issue of 1 in 3 women sexually assaulted, raped in the military, and I gave my little spiel, and then we went on and started talking about other things. A little bit later, my friend and I were in the kitchen, and she said, I never told anyone, but when we were in basic training together at Fort McClellan, Alabama, I was raped by a doctor who was giving me a medical exam. And that happens a lot. You really do hear about a lot of rapes by doctors. And she said, I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell anyone. This was back in the late 60s. I was so embarrassed. I was so horrified. I couldn't tell anyone. And she carried that with her all for 40 years until she started getting some treatment for some other problem at the Veterans Administration. And one of the questions they ask now is, were you ever sexually assaulted or raped in the military? And they ask it of women and men. And she all of a sudden just kind of broke down and said, yes, I was. And then she started getting treatment for it at the VA. And I said, well, have you told your husband? Have you told your kids? She said, oh yeah, that's part of the processing. And she said, one of my kids told me, Mom, we knew something was wrong. We knew there was something there because, sometimes you would just fade away. You would just not be there. And then you would come back. And there would be times that you would be so angry and you would lash out. We didn't know what we had done. We just didn't know. But that all makes sense now. That you were trying to deal and cope with all of that, but you couldn't because you weren't getting any treatment for it. So you just never know, because there are so many women that are carrying this burden around with them. never know.
I'd like to ask you a question which has never been addressed. I wonder if you know about it. What about the question of rape by American soldiers of so-called enemy women?
Well, that's a very good question because, you know,
Could you repeat the question?
yeah, the question was, so what do we know about the rape of, by U.S. military of enemies, like right now? Well, if you think about what we do now know about Abu Ghraib and all of the horrible things that went on there in 2003 and 2004, and that we've seen the 27 photographs, those photographs of the Iraqi men piled on top of each other. And we do know that some of the Iraqi men were sodomized by U.S. military. And we also now know that there are at least 5,000 photographs that we will never see. There are videotapes that we will never see that members of Congress have seen. And they have said that they are so horrible that if those photographs ever get out, that if you think that there is a whirlwind waiting for U.S., anti-U.S. Feeling in the Islamic world, just get ready for this. These things we will never see, but they do include videotapes of U.S. soldiers raping Iraqi women in Abu Ghraib prison. We don't know what level, I mean, how many times that happened. We don't know the numbers of it, but we do know it did happen. They have at least said that there are photographs. There is documentation that that is happening. Yes.
Is there a resistance inside of the military to this kind of thing on any level?
The resistance of...
I mean, against rape. I mean, besides the people who have to tell about their own experiences, but just other people, sergeants at each level.
Well, because of continual pressure outside the military, saying this has to end. Finally, the Department of Defense has created what they call their Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, SAPRO. And each military service has to implement the policies, which is try to create programs that will prevent this by talking to people about it, how wrong it is, how you can't do it, and then responding in a quick fashion if it does happen. And every military base and every military unit is supposed to have a person who is the point person on this. We don't know how successful that is at this point. We do know that there is on one military base, Fort Stewart, Georgia, that in April of this year, apparently they had a series of incidents that finally got the attention of the commanding general. And the commanding general finally said, I as a senior leader have to respond to this. And they did have a march at Fort Stewart, a march to say domestic violence and rape is wrong. That's the first time to my knowledge that any senior officer and staff has ever really come forward like that. I think we still have, I mean, we've got a long, long, long way to go. But the only reason he did that was that there were people that were willing to, keep putting pressure on him, and that articles that are written are forwarded to these guys. And it's an education process, and we're going to hold you responsible and accountable process. There's a long, long, long way to go because this is a criminal act that is embedded in the history of our military, and there are just too many people who just think it's just part of being in the Army.
Isn't it probably the same in all other militaries?
And the question is it the same in all other militaries? Well, in some other militaries, like right now in the Congo, rape is a part of war. Mm-hmm. In the country of Guinea, rape was used just 2 weeks ago on protesters of the military government there. It can be, it's a brutal form of control. I'm being told that we just have about 1 more minute on this. Okay, well, we'll do that. Why don't we go ahead and we'll thank you all very, very much for being here. Will?
Real fast. Hi, Will Covert, proud member of Vets for Peace.
And coordinator of all of our visit. Let's give a hand to him.
I do want to remind you, you can donate to the cause, and walk away